Welcome back to Juice's Arthropods. My name is Juice, as always, and always will be. And today I'm super stoked to talk about the pros and cons of arthropod keeping and how easy it is to convince your loved ones to let you get one. Let's talk first about the pros, them sexy pros of owning an invertebrate. So what's the first pro, Juice, you ask? Massive biodiversity of different invertebrates. You're talking about the largest group of living animals on the freaking planet. What are you into? Is it mantids, beetles, ants? I know people that are just into springtails. You can collect or buy anything. You are talking about something that there is so many of that I can't remember even 1/1 millionth of them. And it's insane to me that every day we're finding new species on a planet that we have lived on our entire existence. So when it comes to my first pro, it is that commercially available invertebrates in the keeping. Every year, I get to learn at least 50 to 60 new creatures that are now available for you to bring into your home. Second, super low maintenance compared to other pets. Do you have a dog or a cat? I don't care. You're going to talk about them forever, and we don't have time for this. I love all animals. But when you compare invertebrates to every other animal on the planet, you were talking about the lowest maintenance creature ever. It does not take much. It takes, when you break it down, a box, food, a place to hide, creature. That's it. Maybe some lighting requirements and some other variables, but you are talking about the easiest pet you will ever own. This one is actually a pro and a con. If your parents are really worried, and I'm saying if you have parents and you're watching this, they're a very short-term commitment as a pet, or alternatively, an extremely long-term commitment. Whichever one your parent or your loved one is more interested in, they are oftentimes, if you go across the broad I mean, most things are beetles, and beetles just simply do not live a long time. So when it comes to the commitment time frame, unless it's a tarantula, it's a very short time frame that you have to take care of these things. Ease of feeding them. I mean, there are so many commercially available feeders for anything that actually eats living creatures. And otherwise, if it doesn't, it's just things you can get at your grocery store. With the exception of like maybe one or two, because there's going to always be the disclaimer that there's like, well, Juice, what about this one? For the most part, any of the ones that are in the hobby, they have been fed by breeders and or buyers that they have to feed them themselves. So they are a very easy to take care of pet that you're not going to have to go and get some specific thing in the mountains, and you don't have specific things you got to worry about. You're talking about a very easy to feed creature at the end of the day. Next, limited risk, ultimately. Yes, there are spiders that you might have to be more careful of, that are more medically significant venom. But across the broad spectrum of invertebrates in general, it's not like a dog. A dog, as much as I love dogs, can and do bite people all of the time. It's not like a snake that's going to bite you when you can bleed. It's not like a bird that's going to claw your face or crap all over your house. You were talking about a very chill pet that the risk of owning one is completely outweighed by how easy these things are to take care of. So if your parent or loved one is concerned about the risk for you, well, unless you're going straight into like some highly venomous centipedes or scorpions or tarantulas / spiders, you really don't have much risk to you at the end of the day. If I tell you I have 100 cats in my house, you're concerned for my health and my sanity. If I tell you I have 100 tarantulas in my house, you're also concerned about my health and my sanity. But one of them will take up an entire zoo, and the other one will only take up 3 shelves at most in my house. When you're talking about owning invertebrates, you can have hundreds of species and take up basically one room. So in terms of scale, this is a much larger potential for scale than any other creature. For instance, isopods, you can have hundreds of isopods in one enclosure that's literally a shoebox. If you had 100 dogs, you have a horrible, crippling hoarding disorder. Easy for travel plans. While there are some things like mantids or jumping spiders that you have to feed at least a couple times a week, there is a ton more tarantulas that you only have to feed once every 3 weeks or potentially a month. So there is a slew of different creatures that you can make if your life is more chaotic and you work 13 to 15 hours a day and a dog or a cat or any other animal is just too much for you. A bug is the perfect. You think a Madagascar hissing cockroach gives a crap if you go on vacation for a week? You toss it some water in its bit dish, you toss some food in there, and you can come back 2 weeks later and this thing is going to be totally fine at the end of the day. An additional pro, these things are like a better version of a fish. No hate from the fish community, but ultimately, I don't have to deal with all the crap that fish people have to deal with. I can have dozens of different kinds of species in my house, and it's like having a fish, and then I'm not really holding them. They're beautiful and super cool to look at, and I don't have to deal with like filtering out water or worrying about nitrates or any of that chaos. These are the easiest fish tank you'll ever have to take care of. Second to last is cost. Even the most expensive spider you would buy, which is typically where you see a lot of costs is in things like tarantulas, that let's say at most you're spending $500, $600, $700 up front between the cage and the spider and everything else. You are not spending more than maybe $8 a year for the rest of its life on feeders. So the cost for all of the creatures I can think of that are commercially available or retail available, all of the cost is up front, and then across their lifespan, it is basically nothing. So you're talking about a very low cost species. If you go with isopods, you're talking leaf litter and some vegetables that you're basically going to throw away as scraps anyways. Madagascar hissing cockroaches, same thing. If it's a beetle larva, for instance, it's just eating the substrate it's in. Same thing with millipedes with an occasional vegetable. We're talking about a very, very, very affordable creature after the initial upfront cost of it, versus reptiles, which can be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just for upfront costs. And don't even get me started with dogs and cats. An additional point to the cost, you know what? There's no vet bills for any of these things because most of them, if they get sick, which is we'll talk more about in the cons, they're dead. So there is no vet bills or anything. There's no medications. You're not paying for any of that stuff. You're talking about a bug that once you pay for the bug, that's all the cost right there. And the last, and honestly, in my opinion, the most important thing or most important pro is you are being added to a community of some of the best people I have ever met. People that, basically treat this like a world life, like a Pokemon, right? They want to collect them all and they want everything that life has that can throw at them. They love to look at new things and talk about new things. And it's really good for the person that maybe isn't the best at making friends outside of the world. They can make friends within the community of keepers. It gives you a built-in thing to talk about if talking and breaking the ice with people is a difficult thing for you. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful community out there with invertebrates. And I cannot speak more highly of them because without you who's watching this and potentially the people that are already in the community, people like me wouldn't exist. Now let's talk, unfortunately, about the cons. Con number one, and ultimately the worst con. Remember when I talked about a short-term commitment? Also a short-term commitment. It's both a pro and a con. For every one thing that lives for 35 years, like a tarantula, there's another beetle that lives for 6 to 8 weeks. So unfortunately, the con is most of these, and sometimes even the coolest ones like mantids, live less than 2 years. Second con is there are species that there is a lot of risk ultimately. There are some centipedes or scorpions or spiders, for instance, that if you have them and they bite you, there is a medical significance to that risk. And so it's important before you purchase anything that you at least know what that risk is. For every one flower beetle that you might get a minor scratch, there is another very venomous centipede that if it bites you, you are going to hate life. So ultimately, there is a risk involved that you might not have with other pets like fish. You know what comes with owning bugs? Being part of the fringe. You will be called weird. You will have lots of moments where people, the second you have a tarantula or a mantis or anything else, that people will say things like, kill it with fire. You will become part of an exclusive club of people that are constantly harassed for the things that they find really cool. So just be prepared that if you're thinking that getting into this group of people with the incredible community I talked about earlier also keeps you from all of the terrible parts of humanity, you are unfortunately incorrect. You will be called weird and you will just have to endure that. Or you'll have to be like me and you'll have to be 6.5 feet tall and you'll have to be really thick skinned. So you got to make a decision. You either got to be really good at the quips or you got to be really good at just putting up with the punches at the end of the day. Another con is there are some that are crazy fast or they fly. So when you're doing your decision on what you ultimately want, keep that in mind. Is it a tarantula? Guess what? A tarantula is faster than your motor skills. So know that going in. For every isopod that you could run down in your slowest day, there is a Bacillitherium metallica that before you blinked, it teleported to the other side of the enclosure. So just remember that. When I talked about the cost of the spider itself or the animal itself, and I said, hey, there's not a lot of cost because, for instance, there aren't vet bills. Well, that also is a con because for the most part, there is nobody, with the exception of a couple, there's nobody to save your little friend if it gets sick. For mantids, if they get some bacterias, they're dead. For isopods, if they get certain bacterias, they're dead. There is no broad spectrum antibiotic for invertebrates. So unfortunately, you oftentimes become the doctor with the support of others, but you will be the one that ultimately has to take care of them if they get sick. So with the fact that there's no cost of it, there's also the fact that if they get sick, oftentimes they just die, and that really sucks. Another con is while for every one species invertebrate that is the easiest thing in the world to take care of, there are some that eat exclusively things like molds or fungus or whatever. Like for every one invertebrate that can eat an easy established diet, there's another one that is eating the most insane crap somewhere on the planet that replicating is actually very difficult. So just make sure you do your homework again, and that con will ultimately be removed. Another con is it's really easy to convince somebody to get a kitten or to get a puppy. It's very difficult to convince somebody to get a medically significant tarantula. So it's a little bit harder to convince people to buy these things or to let you buy them. So that is a challenge. It's also frowned upon heavily to bring a, say, tarantula or centipede or any bug into a public area. So just know that before you purchase one. Remember when I told you earlier how there will be people that think you're weird? Well, there's another really shitty part of owning invertebrates. And that shitty part is the fact that you will tell somebody, and you got to prepare for this. For every person that understands your weirdness, like me, for instance, there's going to be one person that when you tell them your weirdness, they're going to tell you about the animal that you just said how much you loved it. They're going to talk to you about how they just smashed one with their boot or they lit one on fire or some horrible thing that they'll want to tell you about how they don't like the animal that your pet is. If I did or said the same thing about people's cats that they say to me about what they do to bugs when I talk to them about how much I love spiders, it would probably throw me on at least a watch list, if not jail. But you will have people talk to you like that all of the time. So I guess what I'm saying for this con is you really need to prepare yourself for a burning desire to slap the crap out of some idiots sometimes and just bury that somewhere else or tell the new friends that you've made how stupid the person you just talked to is. In conclusion, if you are thinking about buying an invertebrate or an arthropod of any kind, it is crucial that you understand that you are making a decision that will make you a weirdo, and we will accept you for it. Me and the people that are in this community will love you for it. Nobody else will. Everybody else will hate what you're doing. You will say, open a small business, and every time you talk to somebody, they will talk to you like you're a child and that there's no money in bugs. Or they'll offer to sell you things off the street they found. So just know that going in is what will start as a small hobby will ignite a passion or a fire within you that will last you an entire lifetime. It will make you some of the greatest friends that you will ever have, and you will be so much happier and better of a person having it carry you through some of the darkest times in your life when you thought there was no hope, or the best times in your life where you couldn't be happier. But just know that you have to start somewhere, and I hope you start with an invertebrate, which is a perfect perfect pet. Thank you guys again for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And Arthro people, I hope you stay safe, stay educated, and most importantly, stay classy.